subcommittee meetings, so I don't want you to take this as a snub. It's just, I mean, some of these schedules are 2 and 3 meetings at the same time, and and people are on both committees, so it's a problem.
But they heard they brought the snow, so they're trying to punish them.
Okay. All right, I thought it'd be valuable to invite the new Secretary of Education, Amy Rugstadt Gadara, right, to introduce yourself and, tell us about what ideas you all have for, education. We're joined by Senator Newman, and then you have Senator Norman, Senator Lucas. So, why don't you come up here, Amy Gadara, Secretary Gadara, tell us, what your experience has been, what you think we ought to be doing.
Thank you. And do you all prefer I wear a mask
Have you had shots?
Yes.
And booster?
Yes. I'm happy wearing
All right.
I haven't had any.
Turn the mic on though, so
Awesome.
makes it easier to hear
Great.
you.
Thank you. And please let me know if you can't hear me. But good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and senators. It's so nice to have a chance to talk, and I really like this intimate setting. It's much nicer doing this, so thank you. And I'm thrilled to be here. I mean, you all have heard the governor over the last week give his vision of Virginia and helping it to be the best place to live, to work, and to raise a family. And I personally believe we can't do that without focusing on education as being a priority for all of us. And I know that you all also believe in that goal and also believe in the role of education. And I am thrilled to be in this role as secretary. I've spent my entire 30-year career focusing on ensuring that our education systems from early childhood through workforce development are focused on ensuring that every single learner has access to a quality education and that is prepared not only to have a job at the end of that education, but also to be a productive member of society and in their community. And that's what a good education provides people, is that they can be fully engaged in their life and to be a productive member of society. So that's my commitment to you all and to the people of Virginia, is that I will work every single day to ensure that we are the state, the number one state in the country in supporting and investing in people.
Well, interestingly enough, when I heard his comments, and other people were a little surprised, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. 2 of the rating agencies, one ranked us 5th best public school system in America, not the last. Another one 7th. Forbes magazine, 2 years in a row, has ranked us the 4th best public school system in the country. Mm-hmm. So, have you been able to familiarize yourself with how the financing occurs?
A little bit with the financing, getting smarter every day, but I have a long way to go. And
most of it, we have this formula called the local composite index, and it's not perfect, and the net effect is that in some of the rural communities, while in theory, we fund 80% for the poorest of the communities, they fund 20. The net effect is they can't do 20, so we more or less are winding up doing like 85. And in the more well-to-do communities, like where I come from or where he comes from, while it's reverse, 20/80, take Fairfax County, which is the largest, we're at 72/28, but because of all, the various, we got, 100 different languages, and we got wealthy areas, we got areas that aren't so wealthy. The net effect is of our total education budget, we're doing about 85%, not 72. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of other municipalities that are, like that. Mm-hmm. You got that. Then you got school construction. A lot of the rural areas, the buildings are in desperate need of repair, and you can't fix them for free, as you know. So we got a lot, to do. What's been your background? I mean, I know it's, been in education, but have you been a Secretary of Education before?
I have not, Mr. Chairman. I have not. I have spent the the majority of my career working in national nonprofit organizations, starting with the National Governors Association. I actually started as a teacher in Japan,
what?
as a teacher in Japanese high schools,
Wow, okay.
and thought that I had done my senior thesis in college on the role of the business community in education and public-private partnerships. And at that point, Japan was beating us at every indicator, especially in the workplace, and thought, I'm going to go to Japan and figure out what they're doing and bring it back here and learn. And what I realized is the culture was all different. I mean, the number one thing I learned is that they invest in education in a way that we never do, and always. One, the respect that they show to teachers, the investment, the fact that it is illegal for Japanese students to work because they consider the number one job of a student is to get an education and to fuel a vibrant society and workplace. But I came back with a bug to work in public policy and to improve our education system. And as a result, my entire career has been spent working around governors, around state legislators, around state higher education executive officers. So I've always worked around public policy and state policy specifically, but never within government. And so I'm honored right now to have a chance to do that.
One of the other, I'll get to you in just a second. One of the other things problems that within the education situation is the pay, and both you have both higher ed and K through 12. We've had situations in the very well-to-do areas. Let's you all remember Kirk Cox. Kirk was he was speaker, but he was a delegate from Chesterfield County, and he had a career teaching there. And he told me that his top salary after 30 years was $53,000. Given his educational background and experience, had he been in Arlington, Virginia, he would have finished up in the low to mid 90s. And of course, that dramatically affects your retirement. Plus, the municipalities in Northern Virginia have a supplemental retirement system that adds on to the state. And we've had situations where teachers will teach 30 years in Southwest Virginia. They retire from there, and then they come up and get a job in Fairfax and Arlington to boost that highest 3 years, which dramatically affects their retirement. And at the college level, I remember we've now fallen to where we're like 47% of our peer group, which is really not good at all. And a former president of William & Mary, Tim Sullivan, told me one time that in a 2-year period, he lost 28 or 29 full professors, but only one to retirement. The rest all went out of state for higher paying jobs. And, we have some really good higher education institutions here, particularly with, William & Mary, UVA, Virginia Tech, which are really tier 1 schools.
VMI.
And yes, of course, how could we forget VMI? But there's so much to do, and you can't do it for free. I wish you could, but you can't. And it's going to take money and time and attention. And the ability to pay these people and to have facilities to attract them. In my entire career in the General Assembly, and the only thing older than me is the dirt under this building, maybe. And we've had 2 Nobel Prize winners, but they didn't get it for what they did here. They got it for what they did in other states before they got here. 2 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, I went online. At Berkeley alone, at that time, there were 12 Nobel Prize winners teaching at Berkeley, just at Berkeley. And, you got to make it attractive for these people, to come. So, you're going to have, you won't die from boredom. So anyway, that's part of what I have to say. Tommy, you wanted to.
Yes, let me ask you this. This is from my daughter.
Good.
And my oldest daughter is taught 4th grade to 3rd grade, currently teaching kindergarten. Her mother is a former teacher. Her grandmother is a former teacher. and she wants to know what has been your practical and hands-on experience with K-12, or let's say elementary, K-6.
So, Mr. Chairman and Senator, so it's limited. So I did some substitute teaching when I came back from Japan, and I thought that I was going to go get a PhD in education, and ended up, after the 1 year of teaching in Japan and doing some substitute teaching, ended up taking the policy route, and so don't have as much of the practical experience. And for that reason, I'm very happy that I have a partner with me today, and that Superintendent Balo comes from a very strong in the classroom experience and knowledge, and why she's the perfect person to be leading up the Department of Education, being responsible for that. I have teachers in our family. I talk to them all the time. I listen. And to be honest, I wish I had more experience in the classroom in doing that so I could do this job. But what I will promise you is that I am a great listener. God gave me 2 ears, 1 mouth, and I intend to hopefully use that proportionally to listen. And one of the things I'm really eager to do is to set up advisory councils with educators, with parents, with school superintendents, to make sure that our secretariat is listening all the time to what the needs are so we can be responsive to them.
Mr. Chairman, for 11 years, I taught 1 class undergrad at William & Mary in Government Department, and 30 law students in 2nd class. And I ain't right, and you'll figure that out pretty shortly. But I used to always tell them the first class, I said, I'm an IT idiot, and I just this week learned what goggling was.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at me like I've lost my mind, and I had. But my daughter goggled you,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the basis of her question on that. So I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Senator Newman.
Secretary Gadara, good to see you. A couple of things. One, I think you're meeting in this room some of the most important people on education policy you're ever going to meet. Senator Lucas is my friend. I love Senator Lucas, and my wife knows it. That's what I tell everybody. So you're going to really enjoy.
Love him too. He tells his wife I'm the other woman.
I mean, you told me last night you love me.
Well, Norman, it's not true. She loved me first. But Senator Sasslaw, when I was chair of this subcommittee and when he was ranking member, just a huge commitment. And we raised teacher salaries every time we could. And I know you and the governor have said, by golly, we're going to do it. I appreciate that. And Senator Norman is also old as dirt. And the reason I'm wearing the mask is because I'm sitting beside someone that old. But he really has been a great for higher education for a long time, very passionate about that. So we're glad to.
Like Tommy and I call him kid.
Yeah, that's right. No matter how old I am. I'd love for you to maybe just share with us just a little bit, because I think you're being just a little bit modest, and I think this group would like to hear just a little more. Your work for the National Governors Association is huge. It is groundbreaking in a lot of ways, but also a little bit, if you will, about some of your longitudinal work. I mean, you've really done a lot of serious work on how kids kind of get through the process, and so I just wondered if on those 2 items you wouldn't mind just mentioning a little more.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Newman, thank you. I'm pleased to talk, and I'm also pleased to answer any and all of your questions. I'm very transparent and enjoy talking and listening to what you have to say. So my experience at the National Governors Association was seminal to everything I've done in my life. The first report I worked on there was on standards assessment and accountability, and it was at the core of it. It was at the beginning when it was not in vogue to have state data be reported against each other. And in fact, at that moment, it was a policy that you could never report state data on the same piece of paper because we didn't want comparability. States didn't want to be able to compare. They wanted to say the story that we are the best at doing this and that. But the critical work at NGA was about the governors and gubernatorial leadership of working with state legislators in that era of having conversations to set high expectations for every child. And I think that is, to me, what my entire career has been about, it's not good enough to use averages to talk about it's working for some kids. What is critical and what the NGA, my 4 years at NGA did was instill in me a sense of policymakers need to focus on all of the children and all constituents, and how do you make sure you do that? And over the work I also did at NGA, I led to 2 task forces for the chairman's initiative on school readiness, and so that also is where I did quite a bit of work on literally doing return on investment analyses on the investments to be made and why it mattered. Governor Voinovich, later on Senator Voinovich, said, I want to be able to speak like a business person. I want to pull out a piece of paper in my jacket pocket that says on one piece of paper, here's the ROI for why investing in young children will have a return on investment for every single state in this country. And that's what we did for the year, is we created studies, we used data, and we made the case that one of the best investments that states could make is investing in children for the long term. The other one was on college and career readiness. NGA also, with that work, started this focus on changing the expectations of it wasn't, our economy was telling us it's not enough to just graduate our students, and the graduation rate, while it matters, is just one indicator that you've gotten to the next step. But what really matters is ensuring that we are preparing people for success in the long term. And that also was fundamental to the NGA work and changing conversations. So that's really important. If you go from there, I spent time also in between that and the data work was at the National Alliance of Business. And the work there was so important because it was working with the business community and understanding why it was so important to have our education system at all levels be connected to the labor market information and being tied into what our employer community needed, and that needed to be our guiding star, and that was changing constantly, and it was increasing, and we were increasingly leaving families behind because we were not keeping up and making sure that our standards of expectation were rising continuously to meet up with what our economy needed. And this is why Japan was beating us in the 80s, is that they had realized that to prepare every student, they needed to make sure that they were also benchmarking against the business community. And that was the work I did there. But it's also how, to Senator Newman's point, I launched a campaign called the Data Quality Campaign, focused on changing the role of data in education. And it's because I would be working with business leaders. They were generous. They were putting dollars in. They had public-private partnerships. They were advocating for excellence in schools. And they would come back and say, Amy, we're doing all the things we're supposed to. We're creating good policy. We're investing. And yet nothing changes. Why does nothing change in education? We don't get the results we need. And they would come back from visiting with schools and with school personnel, and they'd say, I can't believe it. There's not a single decision that's being made in the system with information. How decisions are being made by anecdote, by how it was done when they were in school, and nobody is making decisions based on hard facts. And so that was a lot of what caused me to start this effort that was about how do we start changing and using data, not just as something that's at the end of a sentence. In education, we get back a number, 22, 1066, whatever it is, and we say, well, that's the result. And then we quickly move on to something else. And what I was trying to do is to say, how do you put that data point at the beginning of the conversation and say, so what does this number tell us? And what are we going to do differently to get different results? That's how any organization that manages well gets results. And so the core work, and I'll end on this, and why I think it matters to what we're all going to do together in Virginia, is if Virginia has some of the best data in the country. Virginia, to your point, Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of excellent things going on in Virginia. We're recognized as a leader in education, but there's no reason we can't be the number one state on everything. And we have
in your career, have you run across a man by the name of Dan Dominich?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
sir.
You know who he is too. Dan was superintendent of schools in Fairfax County, and now he heads that community in schools. Which is providing a lot of help around, to communities in need around the country. And one of the people backing him, or backing that organization, is, I can't remember her first name. She's an ex-wife of and a billionaire in her own right, of Stephen Wynn. I
Yes.
can't remember. You know who I'm talking about? She's been a huge
I think her name is
contributor.
Elaine Wynn.
Elaine Wynn, yeah. And she's been a huge contributor to that. And also the Carvels, James Carvel and his wife is, what's her name? Mary Matlin, yeah. They had an event at their house. I don't know if they still have it. They moved to Louisiana, but they had a house in Alexandria, in Old Town. And they had a big event, honoring them. And Wynn was there. Dominich was there. And so you know who he is.
Yes, sir.
And let me tell you, he was probably one of the best superintendents Fairfax ever had.
Yeah.
He knows. aspect of education he doesn't know.
Yes, sir.
All
So,
right.
and sir, my first job offer, and I chose to go to NG instead, was with communities and schools leading up their Chicago work. So I'm a big fan, and the communities and schools folks were in my office yesterday, updating me on what they're doing in
Right.
Virginia. So it's great.
Okay.
So it's good.
Well,
Secretary Gradera,
Yes.
for the phone call. I really appreciate that. Oftentimes in the discussions about education, the needs of black and brown students somehow seem to come as an afterthought to some people. And I really have an appreciation for all of the work that you've done at the corporate level, and especially dealing with the governors and all these other organizations. But I'd like to know, what exposure have you had in terms of working to try to bring black and brown children into a system where they are receiving a universal quality of education like all other students? Because oftentimes black and brown students really are an afterthought. And so I'd like to hear your what has been your experience in working with students of ethnic races?
Great. Mr. Chairman, Senator Lucas, so it's at the core of everything I've worked on. So the heart and soul of the work I did at the Data Quality Campaign is about longitudinal data. And why longitudinal data matters is that it allows and permits and demands that we see every child, and that no longer are people hidden because they're lost in the averages. And that's so much of what I'm concerned with here in Virginia, is that so often we say everything's great because we're looking at averages, and we're not actually seeing every single child. And that is why I'm a big believer in data, is that if you have the ability to follow individual students over time, and we know where every child is, you can see what the needs are. There is no excuse right now that we do not meet every single child's needs because we have that information. And that's my commitment, is that we're no longer going to lose kids through the crack because we can see them, and it's up to the adults in the system and up to government to ensure that we build accountability to make sure that every child is served. And that's why I'm in this job. That's what I believe in. So that in my professional life is what I've been doing, is trying to ensure that systems see those children, understand those children, and then build the capacity within systems to meet the needs of those children. Because the other role that data plays is we now have incredible amounts of information about what works with individual kids. We know that all kids have different needs and they learn differently, that what my older daughter needs in terms of learning is different than what my younger daughter needs. And so how do we do that? And then in my personal life, my daughters and I have done tutoring for many years in our neighborhood, and done all kinds of in the neighborhood with actual people. One of the things with policy sometimes is that you don't have a chance to work directly with people, and that's always been very important to me, is that we also see children and work as people, not just as at the policy level.
Well, I appreciate that answer, because I'm a former executive director of one of the largest community action agencies in the state. And so in that position, I had oversight for the Head Start program.
Right.
And what I found in those years that I worked as director is that a lot of these students had needs that could not necessarily be taken care of in the classroom. You got students from low-income communities who have a multitude of issues within their own environment. And so you can't teach a child if the child is being abused, if the child is hungry, if the child is sick. And oftentimes I think that gets overlooked. And that has to be a part of the consideration when you, and especially when you're dealing with K through 3
Yes.
or K-12 students, well, across the board.
Yes.
You can't teach a child if they have all those other issues to contend with. And at some point, that has to be a part of the whole dynamic of how we deal with teaching students who are coming from low-income communities.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, may I respond, Senator, and make a
Yes.
comment? So I absolutely agree, and the whole role of integrated services, wraparound services, we know we have the data to showing those schools that address all that, the results academically are seismically different. And yet at the same time, my fear is that we never also want to use what's happening in a child's life is an excuse for not expecting excellence in education. And so it's a yes and. We need to address those issues. We need to use data to identify where there are services that are needed to support families and children. We need to make sure they have that. And we need to ensure that we have high expectations and that we don't use any issues or deficiencies or anything that's happening of children's needs or family needs as an excuse for not expecting that child to live up to great potential that they have.
Thank you for that answer.
Okay, anybody with any questions?
Madam Secretary, I don't want you to think I was recording you. I was just focusing my hearing aids.
It's okay. Okay.
Okay, well, listen, thank you so very much. And
Thank you.
stay in touch with us, let us know what we can do to help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. And please, my personal number is available to all of you. I would really look forward to working with you. There's no way.
Don't
Yeah.
call me, call my cell, not my wife's.
And we all apologize for calling your wife while you're on vacation, especially. So I'm sorry about that. But thank you very much for the invitation. I look forward to working with you all. And please reach out at any point if there's something that you need from me or from us. Thank you so much.
I'll lock your number in when you call me.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Be well.
All right. Miss Bello? Balo. I'm sorry for that. Welcome.
Chairman Zasla, thank you so much for inviting me to come and appear today and just introduce myself. Sometimes I've met a few of you virtually, but this is the first time I've met you in person. So it's very wonderful to meet you and to be here today. My name is Jillian Balo, and I'm the Virginia Superintendent of Public Instruction. Very, very excited to be here. I've been a Virginian now for 6 days. And already
6 days?
6 days. So
Come from Wyoming?
I did. I moved straight from Wyoming. I'm a fifth generation Wyomingite.
Wow.
And this is the first time that I've lived away from Wyoming, save for about 6 months that I did an internship for the late Senator Craig Thomas from Wyoming. So I'll just start with a couple of remarks, and I assume you'll take it away as needed to ask questions, and I'll respond in kind.
What your background is and
Yeah,
what
yeah.
your experience in public education has been.
I'd love to. I'd love to. So, I started teaching in kindergarten. Quickly discovered this kind of sounds like it all started when, but it really did. I quickly decided that I wanted to focus on reading and writing, and so I went right back to college after I finished my degree and just focused on reading and writing, and ended up spending most of my teaching career teaching secondary language arts in a small K-12 school focused on grades 7 through 12. After I finished my master's degree, I thought I wanted to do adolescent literacy, and I jumped right into K through 3 literacy as Wyoming's Reading First Director, and supported schools across the state as they implemented scientifically based reading programs for students who were struggling readers. And that gave me the policy bug that I already had. And so I continued working in policy, and then was appointed by our former governor, Matt Mead, to serve as a policy advisor first, and then I just worked with children and families and oversaw all of the subsidy programs for the state. So I oversaw everything from SNAP to child care subsidies, Medicaid for a while, although I transferred that as soon as I could, and heating assistance and a few other things. And then in Wyoming, we have a unique to Virginia situation where the state superintendent of public instruction is elected, not appointed. So about 1/3 of the states have elected superintendents, 1/3 have appointed, governor appointed, and 1/3 have state board hired state superintendents. So I was finishing my second term as Wyoming's elected superintendent of public instruction. I stepped down 1 week ago today to serve in Governor Youngkin's administration as the state superintendent after 7 years in that position.
Senator Norman.
How did you come to know or interact with Governor Youngkin?
That's a wonderful question, and
Ask wonderful questions.
I believe that. what felt like your world as Virginians during the election and during the campaign was really our epicenter for what was happening with education and what was happening, as an elected Republican with the Republican Party, frankly. And so we watched with enthusiasm and interest everything that transpired in Virginia in general, but especially with a keen eye on what was happening with respect to education. I never envisioned that I would be here today, leaving my post as an elected superintendent to serve in this role. But I believe that we have both conservatives and progressives engaged in public education with so much common ground to move forward, more than I've ever seen in my career. For the first time, conservatives aren't saying our only go-to is school choice. We are saying that's one thing. That's one way that we can address issues and challenges is building more charter schools, magnet schools, lab schools, innovation schools, etc. But we want to improve our public schools. And that throughout my career hasn't been sort of a capstone conversation happening among conservatives. And I want to be part of that movement. I think that there's so much common ground to be found among Americans right now when it comes to quality public education, and I am honored to be leading it.
By and large, quality education doesn't hinge on liberal or progressive ideas. It's generally, you got to deal with it on a situation-by-situation basis. And when I look around the state of Virginia, as an example, Fairfax County, where I'm from, which has got over 1 million people, which is what the population of Wyoming, darn near.
Bigger.
Well, to just give you an example, we're 13 or 14% of the state's population, Fairfax County is, but we're 28% of the student population at UVA. And it's not because we're liberal or we're conservative, it's because of the availability. At first, you're dealing with parents who, by and large, are college graduates, high income, and when you have those two together, you're going to have a different result when neither parent finished high school, barely getting by economically. And it has nothing to do with philosophical ideologies. It's a variety of other things, that drive the train that we've got to deal with. And you heard me tell Secretary Gadara, about various situations, money-wise. One area has a harder time attracting teachers than another, not because of philosophy, but because of money, availability of resources. And, it's just, that's the situation that we have to deal with here to bring the other areas along. And it's not a philosophical problem, it's a wealth problem, no question about it.
That's so well articulated, and certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman, that is so well articulated. And, trying to put it into a bucket of left and right or conservatives and progressives is certainly oversimplifying, and I appreciate how you articulated that.
Well, it's just that, like I said, we've got to deal with the problems as they are, not as, we wish they were. To be honest with you, I doubt if until August, anybody in this building ever heard of critical race theory. I still haven't met anybody who can tell me what the hell it is, and it's not taught anywhere in Virginia. In fact, it's not taught anywhere in America except at graduate courses at Harvard Law School, as far as I know. But that's not the problem. The problem is that we've got areas in this state that are hurting financially, and it's reflected in the educational results. Look at the test scores. That says it all. So you don't have an easy job, ahead of you. But we need to make sure you have the resources, both from financial and personnel standpoint, to accomplish what, needs to be done. And there's a lot to be done, and, we got to make sure, you all have the money, to do this, because you can't do it for free.
Absolutely, absolutely. Secretary Gadara talked a lot about the pre-kindergarten through workforce pipeline and spectrum, and that's really how we need to consider it. If Virginia's is truly to add 400,000 jobs, we need to think about things like our scores in elementary and secondary schools. We need to think about things like what percentage of our students are taking the ACT and SAT. The fact that only 54% of the public high schools in Virginia offer advanced placement courses. The notion that we have about a 44% completion rate in our community colleges, et cetera. And so there
Well, we have a high-ranked public school system.
we do. Yeah.
No mistake about it.
Yeah, and I think that, as I visited with superintendents across the Commonwealth and others, we've really had that conversation. Like, what data do we look at? Sometimes it's really difficult to say, Forbes says this, Ed Week says this, we're looking at this measure, which one matters? And the truth is they all matter when we make them meaningful in a bigger narrative and when we focus on the success of students. And Secretary Gadara talked about that in her remarks, and I really look forward to working with her and with all of you on that.
Mr. Chairman. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I just think.
Steve?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we've had a proud tradition, especially in this subcommittee, I think, working together. And here again, we talked earlier about the fact that we've raised teacher salaries. We're going to do another 5%, another 5%. And I understand from what the governor's saying, going to do more. And that's exactly what Dick is talking about. But we do have a problem, pandemic. I mean, the numbers, the cut scores are rough. I mean, they're rough. And we've got to pull out of this because it's not just in some school divisions, it's in all school divisions. And I just hope that you understand that's got to be job one. I mean, it really is. I mean, Madam Secretary, you've got a big job because you have colleges and a lot under you, but you're it now, right? And we've got to pull out of this pandemic learning loss. And I think this subcommittee likely would be inclined to help you financially and a lot of other ways to get there. But we've got to make the U-turn and start to come back. And we also learned last week that it's just a chunk of our school children are not going back to school. They're finding other options, and that's probably not good for us either. So I know you've got a big job ahead of you, but I hope you won't be shy about coming back in here and asking what our advocate for you to help you kind of get to that point, because this learning loss thing has probably got to be our number one goal.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Newman, thank you so much for that comment, and I look forward to working with all of you to learn more, and not just from you, but from so many across the Commonwealth, as well as the Board of Education and so many others, and really digging in deeply and addressing this issue.
As I mentioned earlier, the person who could give you a quick rundown on things is Dan Dominic. Give him a call, because he can furnish a lot of information, for you on what some of the problems are, how things are going in well areas and not so well areas. He's one of the most knowledgeable
Right.
people I've ever met with respect to public education.
Right. And I think we're starting from a really good place. We have a lot of excellent schools and wonderful teachers and leaders and families and students across the Commonwealth. How do we ensure that every single school is a great school? Every single teacher is a great teacher? And the answer is not only funding. The answer is working together to make sure that we have an infrastructure that supports the funding.
Also, they have in their area a unique guy right now in Ray Brandt. He's superintendent in Fairfax now, but he was superintendent in a bunch of small schools before. He's a unique guy because he was Lynchburg's guy for a while, and then they stole him away. But he's a guy that kind of gets a lot of different school divisions and maybe a good resource for you. Also, he's right now in Fairfax, but he's been all over, big, small, medium, been superintendent everywhere. A pretty great resource for you too.
Thank you.
It's, I mean, you're going to be dealing with a wide range of, and you probably saw it in Wyoming, you know, a wide range of situations. A lot of it dealing with, you know, personal income. And like I said, I mean, we're going to have to supply you with the resources, you know, if we're going to fix a lot of these. And it's not something you can do overnight. So.
And fixing them to where they were is not acceptable. We have to fix,
No,
but we also
when I
need
say
to grow
fix,
forward.
I mean, Langley High School in
Yep.
Fairfax County doesn't need to be fixed. Okay, the average home sells for $3 million that feeds that school, and the average family income's probably close to $400,000 or $500,000. That doesn't need to be fixed. It's
Are they
areas
looking
that
for
are
any lawyers up there?
it's, you know, it's the poor areas, you know, or the ones that are struggling. You know, we got companies lining up to come into Northern Virginia, and we got to figure out a way to get them to go into other areas.
Yep.
You know, I mean, and education has a lot to do with it. Now, a lot of it is not something that, you know, you'll be able to deal much with. I mean, if they settle in Fairfax or Arlington or Alexandria, they're within 30 to 40 minutes drive time of 5 major universities, and you know, in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. So, I mean, we've got problems, no question about it. We got, I mean, our school system overall, they're pretty good, but they could be better.
Okay, now, how about those schools that are not performing well in those communities where they're not so well-to-do like they are up in Northern Virginia? And that's always where I end up asking my question, because I'm really interested in knowing where you're going to start in trying to help students in these communities that are not performing well.
Thank you for that question, and I anticipated that question or something similar to it as I heard you ask Secretary Gadara her answer, and I'm going to start where she started, and that is with really truly understanding what's happening. We know that the socioeconomic challenges of that community are great. We know through the pandemic, before the pandemic, and right now, that when schools in low socioeconomic areas address some of the basic needs, like does the student have food? Are their clothes washed? Do they have access to health care, to dental care, et cetera? That they do much better. Giving students some of those opportunities is a very first step. Fulfilling their basic needs so that they can learn is so vitally important. Basic needs, yes. And you know, we lots of ideas that maybe we can talk. I look forward to visiting with you one-on-one about. But in addition to that, we need to make sure that students in those schools and all public schools across the Commonwealth have access to opportunities that allow them to be one of the 400,000 new jobs created 4 years from now in Virginia. Strong career and technical education courses and pathways that lead to meaningful and prosperous jobs for students. Thinking about innovation within our classrooms with respect to cybersecurity and computer science, and making sure that students have access to educational opportunities that maybe they have access to now, but maybe it's not equitable across the Commonwealth, and maybe it's not in those schools.
Okay, well, listen,
One more thing. There are a lot of opportunities that, you know, for years, and I've been blessed with a pretty good education, but, you know, when I was growing up, the first person in my family to go to college, so it really wasn't a question. You know, I was going to do it, and then you got the push that everybody had to go to college, and there's so many technical jobs out there that are available. And you know, we talk about it. We gave a grant to the shipyard down at the apprentice school to try to get a supply chain going of welders and stuff. But I was in the car business for 12 years, And, you know, we couldn't keep techs. We couldn't keep techs. And we were paying them $75,000 to $100,000 a year as a car tech. And it's not get under the hood with Bubba and, in a wrench anymore. You know, it's all computerized and stuff. And I still do a lot of legal work in the car business. And like everything else, there's a pent-up demand that is not being met on these technical jobs because people are not working or they are not in the training lines for that. So, I mean, we talk a lot about the fundamental and core education that we should, but a former colleague of ours, William Wampler, was the head of New College out in Southwest Virginia, and one of the things that he was doing was to try to get young people interested in going into the manufacturing industry because they had a number of major companies that had contributed significant equipment to train them on. But the thing William did, he started going to the elementary schools. He didn't go and talk to juniors and
That's where
seniors.
you gotta go.
Juniors and seniors in high school. He started going to the elementary schools and then the middle schools in order to try to encourage these young people who didn't want to or were not going to college to look at manufacturing and tech jobs. So I think it's something we need to focus more on. And when I don't say it because the governor happens to be in my party, but one of the things he did say, and I know there's some controversial stuff, but to pushing more internships and getting corporations to invest in some of these areas. And as Louise said, there are a lot of opportunities for adoption of schools in minority schools where corporations can put money but also afford some degree of training on it.
Yes, sir.
And down in Newport News, I mean, we've got the Achievable Dream, which is
Yeah.
98,
That's one of the best.
98% minority
Mm-hmm.
in the worst section.
The
Of
worst
Newport.
section of the city.
And have had remarkable results. So,
Yeah.
And Senator Norman, I think you hit on it, right? It's not doing one thing at one school in one area. It's making sure that all of our schools are great and have the supports that they need. And I feel the need to disclaim that what I've discussed are really what model schools have. What model schools, especially in low socioeconomic areas, have to offer kids from kindergarten through post-secondary training and college. And that's really, again, going back to Secretary Gadara's comments, that's really what the focus is and is for all of us, and working together to look at model schools, model communities, and replicating that across the Commonwealth to the greatest extent that we can.
did you bring any elk with you from Wyoming?
I have pictures.
Thank you so much, and, anytime you want to come over, either one of you, and speak to us, just, simply notify April.
Great.
Or Tyler, there, Senator Lucas. We'd be glad to, hear whatever you have to say. And there are a lot of resources for you, not just Dan Dominance, but many other people who've had a lot of experience, dealing with this, and don't hesitate to contact them.
I look forward to further conversations because I'm far from being able to ask all the questions that I have because I'm a product of the apprenticeship program. A lot of the students in my group went to apprenticeship program that way before we decided to go on and get an undergraduate degree and a graduate degree. And a lot of students may do as I did and may decide never to go to college but still be able to go and get a marketable skill so that they can have a decent life for themselves. And like Senator Norman said, a lot of the jobs that I used to do in the shipyard, they got robots doing those now. So we've got to find a place for people who want to do that line of work. So there are a lot of opportunities to try to make sure that everybody thrives in this society. So
We agree.
Ma'am, did you?
Yes, Senator?
Yeah. Are you with them?
Yes.
And you are?
I'm Sarah Spoda. I was formerly with George Mason University, Sarah Spoda. I was formerly with George Mason University, but I'm now the new Deputy Secretary of Education with Secretary Gadara.
Okay. And your name again?
Sarah Spoda.
Sarah
Spoda.
Spo-
Spoda.
Spoda.
SPOTA.
Thank you, Joey.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I so appreciate the informalness of this first meeting and hope that my genuine, okay, great, thank you. Thank you.